As hard as it is to believe, we are already in May, and I feel like just yesterday I was showing everybody what survived freezing temperatures down to like 19 degrees here, and I swear time flies. But this is the West Wall garden that I shared over the winter, what perennials survived and how things progressed through the entire winter season, and now here we are in May. Okay, so there's so much going on in this garden. I'm really excited to share. Look at all this. Look at the coneflowers. Look at the butterfly bush. Look at the society garlic. And the very first zinnias, the self-seeding zinnias, the volunteer ones. I did not sow these. They just emerged on their own. So these are the ones that Mother Nature decided to bring back this year, all on her own, are popping open right now in May. All of these coneflowers here and Salvia are returners. They have been here for several years, and I've had to thin them out a few times, and this year I'm going to have to do it a little more aggressively because it's preventing this one from getting enough water. This white Salvia is it will self-seed every now and then, but it also needs to be divided because it spreads really easy. And if it doesn't get divided, it will kind of take over other garden plants. I've got Salvia here to my right, and then I've got my purple coneflowers here on my left. Anyway, so I'm going to deadhead these coneflowers, and all I'm doing when I deadhead coneflowers is I just look for the oldest blooms and take them off. That's all I'm doing. I don't really need to know if it's done blooming on that stem. I just go take out all the ones that look older than the rest, and I only leave the freshest and the newest. And I never discard these in the trash. I just toss them somewhere because in a couple years, during the winter months, there'll be some babies over there. Everywhere I toss these, babies come up. They just don't come up the same season because they need cold stratification. So don't expect to see them that year. That's why I don't buy coneflower seeds, and I don't recommend buying coneflower seeds. I think it's better to just divide the clumps, and I have already made a video on that. So if you're interested in learning how to divide your coneflowers, click here because here's the video that I made about that. But besides that propagation methods, if you want to grow them from seeds and you try to plant them on your own, just don't be disappointed when it doesn't work, because I will say they have a very low success rate, and I just feel like Mother Nature does it best. So I leave it to her. If you have not grown purple coneflowers, you are missing out. They are so easy, and I love the way they look year-round. The coneflower is very durable for Texas or anywhere throughout Zone 9A or Zone 9B. But if you haven't grown it, you definitely want to try it. But again, I do not recommend starting these from seed. I recommend getting a clump from a nursery or a bare root supplier online and growing them from the plant itself, and then just toss your seeds in the garden and let Mother Nature do the rest. First are these Verbenas. It's one of my favorites, and as the temperatures start creeping up into the 90s, the Verbenas will start kind of crapping out, as I like to say. So I'm enjoying them while they're here and making sure that they have very little competition for as long as they want to hang around. That's just part of the normal sacrifices of gardening, is to make sure that you're not letting your favorites and the ones that are not as tough as other plants get overrun by the bullies like cosmos. I just love these Verbenas. I'm just giving them a light little deadheading and cleaning up and making sure that any if there's a significant amount of cosmos, I'm just kind of thinning them out. I'm not removing them completely. I'm not against a little overlap, just to keep everything as perky as possible. I always remove the oldest ones from all Verbenas. I take off the oldest blooms, even if it's not dead yet, because I don't come to the gardens every day. So if I do this like once a week for this garden, I know that I'm maximizing the healthy blooms that are on the plant for the time that I'm gone. It depends on what your maintenance schedule is like, on how aggressive that you go in for your deadheading. If you're going to be in your garden every day, there's no reason to take it back as drastically. But again, it's just a personal preference. These are Shasta daisies, and they're different. I don't know exactly what type they are to tell you the variety of why they're different, but if you look at the petals, they're completely different than a normal daisy shape of the typical Shasta daisies that I'm used to. They're more like a pom-pom, but they're super cute, and the way that I'm deadheading them is I'm just going in and removing the oldest buds, and I am not getting rid of these blooms. I'm just tossing them somewhere else in the garden. I really try not to remove any debris as much as possible. I like to keep it in the garden just like Mother Nature would as much as possible. That's why I do it. That's why I encourage it, and I incorporate it in all the gardens that I care for. But anyway, these are the Shasta daisies that are in bloom, and I know that the normal variety with the daisy-like petals, they're in bloom too somewhere. I just don't have a garden right now with any in them. I don't think I'll be at a garden by the time they're done blooming to get a good photo of them, so I'm using these for now, but hopefully I might have some pictures that I can throw in this video. But anyway, Shasta daisies, another one that's in bloom during May. I'm really happy to announce the first hydrangea has finally made its appearance. And here we go. There she is, first one, and then there's another one opening down there. And then the hydrangea right next to her. I propagated this group about a year and a half ago, and just with cuttings straight into the soil. And those are all making flowers now. Here's another flower coming out. I expect this one to be covered in buds and keep covering itself with these little buds right there. Here's another hydrangea. And the tags that I have found in the ground, because I didn't install these, I believe these are endless summer hydrangeas. Now, I don't know how they got that name because they do have an end. They usually end with these fungus on the leaves when it starts to get really humid. But between May and late July, they cover themselves with these beautiful flower buds everywhere you can see. And this one will look really showy within the next couple weeks, so I will definitely be posting what that hydrangea looks like when it comes into bloom. I really can't wait to share that one. This autumn sage is another one coming into bloom right now. This plant is about 4 years old, and it was maybe 1 foot wide whenever I started here, and I've slowly just been laying it down and letting it root to spread it out into this long spread that's about, I want to say, a good 6 feet now. But it is a great native plant, and it's more of like a hot pink purple, really pretty, really valuable plant to have in the landscape because it is evergreen, and it is one of the plants that made it on the list after we had the temps down into the teens. So I'm gonna show a clip of that right here. This is how that plant looked when temps were down into the teens, and this is how it is today, filled in nicely with all the other garden plants here in May, with everything else coming back to life. And gladiolas are in bloom. This is a super pretty one right here. They're kind of in and out. Some are coming and some are going right at the same time throughout May. I've got some more gladiolas back here that I just want to clean up. So another plant in bloom that I'm standing right next to is this blue salvia. And it started coming into bloom a month or so ago. Early spring, I saw the buds on it, but here we are in May, and it's just still pushing out blooms. And as long as you always take off the oldest flower head from the center, you will continue to see the blooms throughout the entire summer. And then once in the middle of the summer, I will take the plant halfway down to just give it another boost because it gets kind of tall and floppy after it rains. So that's the only maintenance that's involved in that. But it's a super pretty flower, and right now this one is about 2 feet tall, maybe 2.5. But it's really pretty, really, really pretty. What has been in bloom for the month of May are these awesome cosmos. This is a dwarf variety. It's a mix of the lemon sulfur an orange Dwarf Cosmos from Ladybird Johnson, and I highly recommend it. You will just have to buy them one time, and if you collect the seeds, which are super easy to do, they will return year after year. But there is nothing that beats this awesome orange color throughout the entire month of May. And if you keep these deadheaded, they will bloom the entire season from early spring all the way until the first frost. So they're very, very responsive to deadheading and self-seeding. So these are my maintainers for like weed suppression. I let these come up throughout the garden to help fill in spots, and I just really like the way the orange pops. I know it is not everybody's favorite color of flower, but pollinators love it. So it is one of the first plants to open up in springtime that invites pollinators back to your garden. So if you haven't been growing Dwarf Cosmos, they're a lot easier and more compatible to fit within a garden than the traditional Cosmos that tend to get 3 to 4 feet tall. So definitely look into getting you some Dwarf Cosmos. And the Bachelor buttons that I sowed over winter, you know, I kind of thought that they would fill in a little sooner and bloom than they did, but spring came so much earlier this year than usual. I don't feel like they had a fair chance. You can still see them back here. There's a couple blooms, but hopefully all of those will get to bloom and get some more of those super pretty, beautiful blooms throughout the month of May. This flower is called Coreopsis, and it's coming into bloom here in May. It actually started around the middle of April, but you can see all the buds here filling in. But Coreopsis is a Texas native. It is definitely a superstar in my book because this is, again, one of the plants that were evergreen after we had a couple weeks of freezing weather consecutively. This plant showed up. Bulbine is another bloomer that's coming in May. These blooms started appearing, I want to say, around the middle of April, and I'm just going to do some little bit of deadheading right now to keep them coming. My tripod is having a bad day. Anyway, the sooner you remove these, the ones that are getting spent, the quicker these new ones will bush out and fluff out and bloom out, however you want to call it. So you want to definitely let that plant focus all its energy, or as much energy as you know that you can direct, to the direction of new buds. Because by leaving these on here, it's going to try to make a seed, because that's a plant's natural life cycle goal, is to reproduce and make seeds. So when you interrupt that, it starts wanting to make a flower again. That's the theory behind deadheading that a lot of people don't realize, is that it's basically tricking the plant into the reproduction goals, because reproducing is the plant's natural life cycle. So as long as it's making a bloom, it's pursuing its natural life cycle. And then part of that means after the bloom, it makes a seed. So if you remove the stem before it has a chance to make a seed, it goes into the natural life cycle mode of trying to reproduce again, which means putting out more blooms. So that's the whole science behind deadheading and why it's important to deadhead if you really want to promote blooms. That's Bulbine, just one of my little favorite, reliable, succulent plants. And then here's that plant again, that Beardtongue, or that Foxglove. It's a North American native, or native of North America. I'm not sure if it's like specific to the southern region or the northern region of North America, but I showed this plant. This is another one of the plants that I showed in my video that was fine after hard freezing weather. This little patch right here was a low mounding little evergreen clump that I just love. It stays really tidy and low to the ground. And then these are the blooms that it puts out in May, which I just love. There's a couple more down here. So here's another one. The sooner I take the blooms off, it's the same concept of why I take the blooms off of Juga. I want this plant growth. This is what makes me love the plant. And the more blooms that I take off, the sooner I take them off, it will focus energy on spreading the plant than the flower production, which in this case, I mean, don't get me wrong, I love the flowers. They're beautiful. but I would rather have more of the plant just because it's a great low-growing evergreen that can be tucked in almost anywhere in the garden and add some type of interest, because the fact that it's withstanding temperatures into the teens with no problem. It's even okay, can go several weeks without water once it's established. So it's pretty tolerant, and I haven't seen any sort of vulnerabilities for pests and disease. So it's a winner and definitely worth considering working in the landscape. Dianthus is still blooming over here in part sun, part shade. And Gerber daisies, these are another May blooming flower. And the ones in this garden actually bloom intermittently all year, but I feel like there is a lot more of these blooms coming out, and these are about to get deadheaded. But I love these Gerber daisies. They're so pretty. And is a white Agapanthus just coming into bloom. It's got some buds down there, and then this one will need to be deadheaded, but you can see it's coming into bloom. And this jasmine, not one of my favorite plants, and it is one that I do not recommend growing because of the maintenance involved. Unless you have a huge area that you don't care if it gets overtaken, then sure, go ahead and grow Star Jasmine. See, for me, when I'm considering the value that a plant adds to the garden, I'm always comparing the bloom time versus the maintenance that's involved. And if the maintenance that's involved with maintaining the plant lasts longer or requires more time and energy and months than the plant is in bloom, then I'm not really interested, because it's demanding more than it's giving, in my opinion. So I try to avoid any plant that takes more than it gives. And kind of like with people, you want to have the same type of relationship with plants that you would have with people, and have a nice harmonic balance of give and take, or at least as close as possible balance of give and take relationship. Because what ends up happening when a plant takes more than it's giving, it's usually because it's demanding maintenance to the extent that if you don't perform the maintenance, it becomes a threat to other plants. So that is why, to me, I don't really value any plant that demands more maintenance than blooms that it's giving in return, especially in the amount of time and effort and energy throughout the year that's needed to prevent sabotaging other plants. So I'm not willing to sacrifice other plants in the garden or even put them at risk because some plant wants to take more of my energy just so I can have some pretty blooms for 1 month out of the year. And that month happens to be now in May, and although some of my clients just love it and die for it, I would never plant it. It's just too high maintenance. If there was some place I could let it go wild that it wouldn't take over some natives, maybe. But as for Star Jasmine, it is not a plant that I recommend. The other jasmine, Arabian Jasmine, gives you that same scent intermittently throughout the entire year, and it's much less demanding, and it actually is a better companion for any garden plant and performs better. And it doesn't really have any maintenance, really. It's just low demand. Now, the flowers aren't as showy, and it doesn't cover itself in that profuse set of blooms, and the blooms are actually pretty insignificant on the plant because the leaves are light and so the flowers are white, but you will usually smell it before you see it. So that is why that jasmine is, if you're in love with the smell, then get the Arabian Jasmine instead of the Star Jasmine.